Hello, my name's Andy. Welcome to episode 38 of Keeping Water. Before I outline what you can see in this week's episode, a little public information announcement. From next week, I'm moving to a Sunday release day. This is mostly to give me a day off work to finish any last minute editing or filming, rather than rushing things on a Friday evening. In this week's episode, I'm going to be showing my latest water quality test results, my Plan B mini project for the gravel liner, some planting I've done in the walled area, and a geeky experiment I've been trying out. With my third major project fast approaching, and with a change in release day, there's never been a better time to subscribe if you're not already. Remember that when you click the subscribe button, your pond becomes instantly invisible to herons and otters alike, or so the legend says. Remember also to like or dislike, comment and or share, all the usual fun YouTube stuff. I'd be really grateful. Right, let's get started. With the weather inconsistently but sort of warming up, the fish getting hungrier, frogs spawning in the pond, blanket weed fortunately dying off, the bioload in the pond is increasing. Now, although my new filter is up and running, the bacteria in it and in my older filtration may not have developed after winter to the levels needed to manage that load. Which means this time of year is a tricky time, and even though I think I'm feeding appropriately, it's sensible not to leave too much to chance. So I therefore need to make some objective measurements of how the pond, or more accurately, the water, is doing. So it's probably the most important time of year to complete regular water tests, which for me is the usual parameters, namely those involved in the nitrification process, ammonia, nitrite and nitrate, and pH and the associated KH and GH, but also oxygen and chlorine. I must admit that I choose to not take a too obsessive approach to this. As long as the parameters are within safe levels, I prefer stability rather than perfection, so I don't chase optimum results. Anyway, I'll share this week's tests, which, spoiler alert, I'm pretty pleased with. First off, ammonia. Last year I didn't have any major problems, but occasionally I'd have a greener result, which would indicate an amount of 0.25 milligrams a litre or even a bit more. This didn't appear to cause any problems, and additionally I'm not sure you can ever have absolutely zero ammonia, but you always want as little as possible. This week's test has provided about the weakest yellow result I've ever had, and a lighter shade than the zero one. Hopefully this means I'm getting the feeding right, and the new filtration is doing its job, so far at least. Next, nitrite. Again, a nice zero result, which I hope is also indicative of my getting things right, again for the time being at least. Nitrate next, and once again I'm at 12.5 milligrams. I'm always between 12.5 and 25, and as I think the safe level is 20 to 60, then I'm not really too bothered. I've never had zero nitrate, in spite of all the plants, but equally it's never been at unsafe levels either. On to pH, GH and KH. Once again I hit 8 for my pH. My pond is consistently at this. I've once had a result of 8.5, but 2 days later it was back at 8, so I'm not sure if that was a bit of an anomalous test result. 8 is the higher end of OK, I believe, but the consistent level, in spite of rainfall, water changes, seasonal changes, is a win for me. The result for KH was 7 drops, meaning 7 degrees of hardness, which also translates as 125.3 parts per million, which is almost in the middle of the advised range of 89 to 142 parts per million. Again, this is quite a consistent result, and as KH works as a buffer to help maintain consistent pH levels, that's probably not surprising. I'm pretty happy with these results, as I think hopefully correctly, that is indicative of a stable system. My GH result was 9 drops, or 9 degrees of hardness, which is also equal to 161 parts per million. The recommended range is 60 to 160, so I'm slightly above. I have quite hard water out of the tap, which explains this, and again it's stable and consistent, so I'm not too concerned. Finally, oxygen. As always, I find this really hard to read with any degree of certainty. I think the colour matches best with the darker end of the range though, which I'm hopeful means that oxygen levels are good. Certainly the fish have never presented as experiencing low oxygen levels. Chlorine, I didn't film the test, but it showed that I had no chlorine present, which again is the usual result, so happy days. With the weather up and down at the moment, but trending towards higher temperatures, the fish wanting to feed more, and me aspiring to provide them with plenty of grub for health and growth, I'm going to keep a close eye on water quality, with some confidence however that the filtration will be adequate to keep things positive. As you'll have seen in last week's episode, the plant project didn't quite work out, but I've got a plan B for the gravel liner I used with it. One of the minor flaws I think my pond has is there is too much liner showing above the water, especially when the marginal plants have been cut back or died back over winter. It's even worse around the skimmer, but I'll talk about that in a bit. Anyway, the solution I'm considering is to hide the main liner with the gravel liner, which would both look more like a natural pond bankside and would also provide some UV protection for the plain liner. I therefore removed the gravel liner from the media grids, for which I also have a plan B, and I'll show more of that in a future episode. And then roughly positioned them behind the marginal plants along one side of the pond. They're not cut to size, just folded back, but I think they look much better than plain black liner. I did kind of regret installing the pavers last week, as I could have used them to trap the new liner and made a neater finish. I guess I can either cut the liner and add a small amount of cement, or use some liner tape to stick it in place, or lift up the pavers and then re-mortar them in place with the liner underneath. I think that this test on first look is definitely worth pursuing, getting some more liner and installing it in place properly. The main problem, as I said earlier, is placement around the skimmer. If I can manage to do it with reasonable neatness, it will definitely improve on how the liner looks now. It was a retrofit skimmer, but even so I could have done a smarter job. I'm not sure I'll carry on the gravel liner too far around the rest of the marginal shelf of the pond, as the plants on the other side do a reasonable job of blocking the line already. We'll see how well the first stage goes, and then decide. As you may know from my previous videos, and if not, you'll certainly have a good idea by the end of this segment, I know very little about plants, either garden or pond types. Anyway, since making the walled area, I've wanted to successfully plant it with some plants that would cover the earth and possibly hang over the wall and into the water. This hasn't worked out perfectly, with most of the original plants I bought, with one noticeable exception, either not flourishing or dying, and then being replaced by weeds, grass or just bare earth. So I wanted some new plants. My only criteria, as I've said, were that they would spread, rather than grow tall, and grow down over the wall and into the water. With little other knowledge or priorities, I did some Googling and happened upon Creeping Jenny, which can in some form be used as marginal plants. Anyway, I ordered some from Lincolnshire Plants, which arrived with pretty good speed and in really good condition. As you can see, I then used my very limited knowledge to plant them, my main aim being to plant them closer to the edge, meaning they were sort of in the middle of the two places I wanted them to end up at, i.e. growing down into the pond and covering across the walled area. I think I've probably planted them too close together, but other than that I think they'll be okay. I need to keep them well watered, but that's obviously pretty easy in a garden with a pond. We'll see how well they grow and what they look like. I expect not very much, as I've no green fingers, but we'll see. This last week I've been testing a reasonably unrelated project, which is using Twitch to monitor the fish more closely and live streaming it while I do. The main aim was to get a closer look at the fish than my CCTV can give me, and from different perspectives. While being a bit of a nerd, the idea of live streaming at the same time also appealed to me. Although, if you don't know already, Twitch is mostly used for gaming, people also use it to share a whole range of different activities, including performing music and showing off their pets. I'm not convinced anyone else will ever watch it, but it's a convenient way of streaming video to myself if nothing else, so I'll give it a go. Ideally, I'd really like to be able to stream underwater footage, but that will almost certainly mean buying more hardware, so that's not something that will probably happen anytime soon. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you would consider tuning in and watching some of the live stream. Again, I can't promise it's going to be exciting, that's really up to the fish. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Keeping Water, I really do appreciate it. As I said at the start of this episode, I'm changing to a Sunday release day from next week's episode. More interestingly though, episode 39 will show you my third project for 2021. I'm not really sure it can be called a project, but it's my favourite nonetheless. I'd be delighted if you'll join me in showing you what Project 3 is, what I've been doing for the last few weeks, and how it's working out now. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.